At 6:42 on the morning of the Los Angeles International Medical Procurement Summit, Elena Park stood alone behind the main ballroom and checked the Korean terminology list for the fourth time. The document was 31 pages long. Most of it was ordinary procurement language: delivery windows, software licenses, service-level penalties, preventive maintenance. The dangerous words were the small ones. A pump could be water-resistant without being waterproof. A device could pass a functional test without being recertified. A batch could be exposed to humidity, flooded, splashed, sprayed, or submerged, and each word triggered a different chain of questions. Elena had spent 12 years making sure those chains did not break when they crossed languages. On the other side of the curtain, technicians tested the stage lights above a white table arranged with 18 silver pens. By 10 o'clock, representatives from 18 hospitals were expected to sign a $60 million agreement with VantageBridge Medical Systems. The purchase covered 4,800 intelligent infusion pumps, docking stations, software licenses, and 5 years of maintenance. An international recall of an older model had left neonatal units, oncology wards, and surgical floors competing for a shrinking supply of safe equipment. Reporters had already named today's agreement the purchase that would end the shortage. Marcus Vail entered the backstage workroom without looking up from his phone. As VantageBridge's chief commercial officer, he had spent 3 months promising investors that the contract would close today. "Final reminder," he said. "The signing stays on schedule. Loading begins at the port warehouse tomorrow at 5:30. If we delay, the Hospital Alliance can reopen the bid, and we lose the order." In front of the media, no one says uncertain, risk, or further review. He looked at Elena then, as if the last instruction belonged to her alone. "Make the translation sound smooth. We don't need every sentence dragged through a courtroom." Elena closed the terminology file. Technical interpretation is not supposed to make one language sound prettier than the other. It is supposed to make both languages carry the same meaning. Marcus's smile narrowed. "Today, your job is to help people understand each other." "That is always my job." "Good." He glanced at the clock. "Then don't make it harder than it is." The technical confirmation meeting began at 7:15 in a glass conference room overlooking the ballroom. Aisha Rahman, Director of Clinical Engineering for Westlake Children's Hospital and the Hospital Alliance's safety lead, sat nearest the presentation screen. Across from her were VantageBridge executives and representatives of Seogen Meditech, the Korean supplier. Hyejin Lee, Seogen's quality director, moved through the manufacturing report in a low, careful voice. She was precise enough to pause before every number. When she reached the storage incident, she stopped looking at her slides. "During the storm surge in Busan, seawater entered the East Warehouse," she said in Korean. "All devices from the Chimsa batch were opened, dried, and functionally retested before shipment." Elena interpreted without hesitation. "During the storm surge in Busan, seawater entered the East Warehouse. All units submerged in seawater were disassembled, dried, and retested for function before shipment." Aisha's head lifted. On the screen, however, the English summary said, "Units exposed to elevated maritime humidity were inspected." Elena raised one hand. "We need to clarify the English summary. The Korean disclosure says the devices were submerged. The slide says they were exposed to humidity. Those are different incident classifications." Marcus leaned toward his microphone. "It's a condensed summary. Continue." "The difference is not stylistic. If seawater passed the housing seams, the required validation would be different." Aisha turned to Hyejin. "How high did the water reach? Did it rise above the casing joints?" Elena translated. Hyejin answered that the insurance inspection had recorded water lines above the lower connection ports on at least part of the affected pallet. Before Elena finished interpreting, Seogen's commercial manager, Min-Soo Choi, cut in English. "The pumps were recertified. Every unit passed." Elena looked at him. Hyejin had not used the Korean term for regulatory recertification. She had said, "Jaegenyung Jiamso Walio, repeat functional inspection completed." For accuracy, Elena said, "The quality director stated that a repeat functional inspection was completed." She did not say the units were recertified by a regulatory authority. Minsu's expression hardened. That is what I meant. It is not what she said. Aisha had already opened a notebook. Was insulation resistance tested after drying? Were the flow sensors validated under load? Did anyone test for salt residue inside the ports? Each question passed through Elena to hygiene. Each answer came back more cautiously than the one before. Insulation had been checked on a sample. Flow calibration had been run, but hygiene could not confirm whether every test used a loaded line. Surface cleaning had been documented. Salt residue testing was not listed in the summary before her. Marcus placed his palm flat on the table. We have 18 delegations arriving and 45 minutes left. The English document is the signing document. These units passed inspection. We are not reopening a completed quality review because an interpreter prefers a different noun. I am not making an engineering judgment, Elena said. I am identifying a material difference between the source statement and the English record. Then you have identified it. We are moving on. Hygiene lowered her eyes to the paper report beside her. Elena noticed that it was 43 pages long. The English version in front of Aisha ended at page 42. Hygiene turned a page before Marcus could close the discussion. A marine insurance investigation number appeared at the top of page 17. Below it was a table of serial numbers. Elena compared the first three against the shipping manifest in her folder. They matched. Marcus called for a 10-minute recess. As chairs moved back, he came around the table and stopped beside Elena. You are not quality control, he said quietly. No. You are not counsel. No. Then stop trying to decide whether this deal proceeds. I have not decided anything. I translated the disclosure and corrected a false equivalent. He glanced through the glass wall at the cameras being positioned in the ballroom. At 10 o'clock, translate what is on the approved English summary. Nothing else. If a speaker says something different, I will interpret what the speaker says. For the first time that morning, Marcus did not pretend his impatience was friendly. Translate, he said. Don't think. At 10, the ballroom lights rose over a crowd of hospital executives, Vantage Bridge directors, investors, and medical industry reporters. The summit streamed live from 3 cameras. Behind the signing table, a 40-foot screen displayed a rendering of an infusion pump beside the slogan "Certainty when every second matters." Marcus delivered the opening remarks. He spoke about shortages, partnership, and the obligation to move quickly when patients could not wait. Every sentence made delay sound like cruelty. The pressure was real enough to make the argument effective. One hospital in the Alliance had postponed non-urgent infusions for lack of replacement pumps. Another was borrowing equipment from an outpatient center and moving it between buildings twice a day. Marcus displayed those numbers without mentioning that urgency made accurate disclosure more important, not less. Around the signing table, several hospital executives watched the presentation with the exhausted expressions of people who had been offered a choice between an immediate shortage and a risk they had not been permitted to measure. Elena sat at the end of the stage with her microphone, listening through an earpiece to the Korean channel. Hygiene was 2 seats away. The quality director had the full report closed beneath both hands. The moderator invited questions before the signing. A reporter from a healthcare trade publication asked whether the devices had experienced any manufacturing, storage, or transportation incident that the hospitals should know about. Minsu began to answer, but Hygiene reached her microphone first. She answered in Korean, using the word chimsu before describing the seawater that had covered the equipment. Elena heard the noun clearly. So did everyone listening on the Korean channel. Yes, Elena interpreted. The shipment includes devices that were submerged in seawater during the flood at the Busan warehouse. The room changed before she finished. Pen stopped moving. A director turned toward Marcus. Aisha sat forward, her eyes fixed on Hygiene. Marcus lifted his own microphone. She means the units were exposed to maritime humidity during the storm. Elena kept her voice level. For the record, the Korean word used was chimsu. It means inundation or submersion, not humidity exposure. The live stream camera swung toward her. Marcus's smile remained in place, but color rose along his collar. Thank you, Miss Park. We have the approved technical summary. The approved summary does not match the answer just given. I recommend pausing the signing long enough to compare it with the original incident report. A murmur moved across the first row. One of the hospital representatives set down his pen. Marcus turned fully toward Elena. You were hired to repeat what people say, Ms. Park, not turn one noun into a $60 million crisis. There were several seconds in which no one moved. Then someone near the investors section gave an uncertain laugh. Two others followed, the sound thin and embarrassed. Elena looked at Marcus, not at the cameras. I am repeating what she actually said. Marcus made a small motion toward the production booth. The green light on Elena's microphone went dark. She pressed the switch once. Nothing. Her own face appeared on the giant screen behind the stage, composed, silent, one hand resting beside a microphone that no longer carried her voice. Marcus addressed the room. We apologize for the interruption. Vantage Bridge is terminating Ms. Park's contract effective immediately. Security will collect her summit credentials, and we will find an interpreter who understands the difference between translating and trying to run a company. No one applauded. The absence did not feel like support. It felt like a room full of people deciding that stillness was safer than objection. Two security officers approached from the side aisle. One asked for her badge without meeting her eyes. Elena removed it herself and placed it in his hand. She gathered only her personal notebook and phone. The technical packet belonged to Vantage Bridge, and she left it on the table. As she crossed the stage, she passed hygiene. The quality director's lips moved around a silent apology. Elena did not blame her for the word. She blamed everyone who had heard it and chosen to replace it. Behind her, Minsu took the interpretation seat. Marcus announced that the misunderstanding had been resolved. The silver pens were distributed. Before Elena reached the ballroom doors, applause rose for the signed agreement. In the service corridor, her phone vibrated 3 times. The first message came from her agency. Vantage Bridge had filed a formal complaint accusing her of gross mistranslation and disruptive conduct. All her pending assignments were suspended during the investigation. The second warned that she might be liable for breach of confidentiality if she disclosed information from the summit. The third was a link to Vantage Bridge's public statement. It had been posted less than 4 minutes after she left the stage. Today's brief interruption resulted from an outside contractor's misunderstanding of routine technical language. The safety and certification of all equipment remain unquestioned. Her name was already circulating beneath clips from the live stream. In one still image, she stood beneath the slogan "Certainty when every second matters" while security waited beside her. Commenters who spoke neither Korean nor medical engineering were debating whether she had wanted attention. 2 clients canceled consultations before she reached the lobby. A third asked her agency whether Elena could be replaced at a regulatory hearing the following week. Those assignments had nothing to do with Vantage Bridge, but professional trust moved through the interpreting world faster than formal findings. Hospitals hired agencies because they did not have time to investigate every interpreter themselves. A phrase like gross mistranslation could close doors long before anyone decided whether it was true. Elena locked the screen. For 12 years, surgeons, regulators, engineers, and families had trusted her to carry exact meaning through rooms where an imprecise word could alter consent, liability, or care. By noon, that history had been reduced to an accusation written by the company that had ordered her to lie. She did not contact a reporter. She did not upload the clip or describe the missing page. Professional confidentiality did not disappear because her employer had violated it first. Instead, she sat at a small table in the empty interpreter's lounge and opened a new entry in her encrypted professional log. Original Korean phrase, transcribed, Busan Chango Chimsa Dangsi Heja Jamjin Jangbai. Speaker, Hygiene Lee, Supplier Quality Director. Time, 10:17 a.m. Context, direct response to public disclosure question before execution of purchase agreement. She recorded her interpretation, Marcus's correction, his instruction to use the English summary, the moment her microphone was cut, and the names of everyone at the technical meeting. She described the 43-page Korean report, the 42-page English copy, the marine insurance number on page 17, and the matching serial numbers she had seen before the file was taken out of her reach. She wrote only what she had personally heard or observed. No conclusions. No guesses. At 8:18 that evening, an unfamiliar address sent a secure message through Westlake Children's Hospital's official safety portal. This is Dr. Aisha Rahman. I need to verify the exact language used today. No patient information is included. Elena accepted the protected call. Aisha appeared in a clinical engineering laboratory, still wearing her summit badge. Behind her, 2 infusion pumps sat on a stainless steel bench. One was connected to an external flow analyzer. The other lay on its side with its interface cover removed. 24 advance units arrived last week for pre-use testing, Aisha said. We set one at 10 milliliters per hour. Its display remained normal, but the analyzer recorded a short output spike close to 40. Elena looked at the second device. That one failed leakage current testing, Aisha continued. When engineering opened the interface cover, they found green corrosion and crystals that may be salt residue. We have quarantined all 24. No patients were connected. For a moment, the only sound was the laboratory ventilation system. They were scheduled to enter service at 7 tomorrow morning, Aisha said. In the neonatal intensive care unit. Elena thought of 10 milliliters becoming 40 while a screen continued to promise 10. Aisha leaned closer to the camera. The word they used on stage, does it truly mean the devices were underwater? Not possibly damp, Elena said. Submerged. Aisha closed her eyes once. When she opened them, she was no longer asking for a linguistic opinion. She was calculating the size of an approaching failure. The port warehouse begins loading in 9 hours and 12 minutes, she said. Once those pumps divide across 18 transport routes, tracing and stopping them becomes exponentially harder. Elena opened her laptop. She had no job, no summit badge, and no access to Vantage Bridge systems. But she was still the only person outside the supplier's delegation who had heard the original disclosure and understood exactly what it required them to do. Elena did not touch the keyboard until she had asked Aisha 4 questions. Who owns the documents you want me to review? The Hospital Alliance received them as part of the executed procurement package. Has your legal department authorized disclosure to an outside language specialist? Not yet. Then do not send them yet. Aisha looked past the camera toward the 2 pumps on the laboratory bench. We have less than 9 hours. And if we mishandle the documents, Marcus will spend those hours arguing about how we obtained them instead of what they say. Elena folded her hands beside the laptop. I can tell you what the word on stage meant. I cannot tell you from one word that 4,800 devices are defective. I can establish what the supplier disclosed in Korean and whether the English record carries the same meaning. Your biomedical engineers must determine the technical risk. Your lawyers and safety office must authorize every file I see. There was a brief silence. Then Aisha nodded. I'll get authorization. Within 11 minutes, she had expanded the quarantine from the 2 failed pumps to all 24 advance units. She disabled their clinical release status, sealed the laboratory access log, and notified Westlake's on-call patient safety officer. At 8:47, the Alliance's Deputy General Counsel joined the call. She confirmed that the hospitals had a contractual right to commission an independent translation of supplier materials already delivered to them. She gave Elena a written engagement limited to emergency linguistic review and instructed Aisha to use the hospital's encrypted evidence platform. Only then did Elena accept the files. The authorization did not restore her agency contract or her professional reputation. It did something more useful. It established who had asked her to act, what she had been asked to examine, and why she was permitted to examine it. At 8:56, a secure folder appeared on her screen. The countdown showed 8 hours and 34 minutes. Elena downloaded nothing to her personal drive. She worked inside the hospital platform, where every view, annotation, and export would be time-stamped. The lawyer created a read-only evidence copy before Elena opened the first document and recorded its cryptographic fingerprint. If a page changed later, The system would show when and by whom. It was slower than dragging the files onto her desktop. Slowness, she reminded herself, was not the enemy. Untraceable haste was. On a second screen, the public video of the summit continued to spread. A news banner reduced the dispute to interpreter derails hospital deal over one word. Elena turned the screen face down. The answer to public humiliation was not a faster public performance. It was a record that could survive people who wanted the story to be simpler than the evidence. The Korean incident report contained 43 pages. The English summary contained 42. Elena began at page 1. She did not search only for chimsu. Searching for the word she already suspected would make it easy for someone to accuse her of building a conclusion first and selecting evidence afterward. She opened a blank comparison table with columns for source page, Korean text, literal meaning, approved English wording, degree of variance, and related document reference. Then she read every line in order. The first 6 pages concerned the Busan warehouse, the storm surge, and the insurer's inspection authority. The English version compressed them, but did not materially alter them. On page 7, the language changed. The Korean report recorded that the affected pallets had remained in saline floodwater for 11 hours and 43 minutes. The English summary described temporary environmental exposure during the storm event. The duration was gone. The seawater was gone. Elena entered the complete sentence, translated it closely, and attached the timestamp from the insurer's field notes. On page 11, the source report stated that the waterline exceeded the lower housing seam and that moisture was observed inside some connector assemblies. The English version said packaging in the lower storage zone showed signs of dampness. It moved the event from inside the equipment to outside the box. On page 14, the Korean report listed the post-drying procedure: power on verification, internal self-test, display confirmation, and basic keypad response. There was no loaded flow test, no full electrical safety sequence, and no regulatory review. The English summary called the process recertification. Elena highlighted neither word. She did not need emphasis to improve the facts. She wrote, "Source describes a limited repeat functional check. Source does not state regulatory recertification." Then she reached page 16. At the bottom was a continuation mark leading to K17. The next page in the Korean report carried the marine insurance investigation number she had seen at the summit. It described saltwater passage beyond the lower casing area and recommended expanded electrical and flow testing before commercial release. Below that paragraph was the serial number range for the affected inventory. Elena opened the shipping manifest. The first number matched. So did the last. Every one of the 4,800 pumps waiting in the port warehouse fell inside the recorded range. She checked the English folder again. Page 16 was followed by page 18. The PDF viewer still counted 42 pages because the page labels had been reset after the omission. Missing pages were not automatically proof of concealment. Attachments were revised. Drafts were superseded. Scanners skipped sheets. Elena added a note: K17 absent from English production, reason not established. Then she opened the electronic signature certificate attached to the executed agreement. The certificate did not reproduce the report, but it recorded the hash, file name, and page count of every attachment presented for signature. The Korean incident report was listed as 43 pages. K17 had not been an irrelevant sheet discovered after the contract. A 43-page report had been included in the signed package. The English production now contained 42. Elena compared the document metadata. The Korean PDF had been generated 6 weeks earlier from Seojeon's quality archive. The English summary had been created 11 days later under a VantageBridge project account, then revised twice on the same afternoon. Marcus approved the summit packet. Metadata could not prove who deleted a page or why. She listed it under chronology, not conclusion. The discipline felt almost unnatural after what had happened on stage. Anger offered verbs like concealed, falsified, and endangered. Evidence required smaller verbs: stated, omitted, changed, matched. She chose the smaller ones because they could carry more weight in a room where every adjective would be used against her. At 10:38, Elena called Aisha and the hospital lawyer back into the secure room. "I have 4 material differences," she said. Duration and saline immersion were removed. Water beyond the housing seam became damp packaging. A limited function check became recertification. And the affected serial range matches the warehouse inventory. "So the pumps are unsafe," the lawyer said. "I did not say that." Elena heard the fatigue in her own voice and forced herself to slow down. "I am not qualified to determine whether the pumps are safe. I can establish that the English documents deleted or weakened risk descriptions present in the Korean source. The engineering team must determine what those conditions mean for the devices." She sent them a draft declaration. The limitation appeared in the first paragraph, again before the findings and once more above her signature. "I offer no opinion on device safety, defect rate, regulatory compliance, or clinical suitability. My conclusion is limited to the accuracy and completeness of the English rendering of the supplier's Korean language disclosures." Aisha read it twice. "Good," she said. "Now we test what they left out." At 11:04, Elena submitted the comparison table and declaration through 4 channels named in the contract: the Hospital Alliance Patient Safety Office, Vantage Bridge Quality and Compliance, the board's Independent Audit Committee, and the Protected Medical Safety Reporting Line. Each submission generated a receipt. She saved the receipt numbers beside her professional log. Marcus's attorneys responded at 11:19. The notice ordered her to stop contacting Vantage Bridge personnel, return all confidential materials, and preserve her devices for anticipated litigation. It accused her of violating non-disclosure obligations and manufacturing retaliatory alarm after a lawful termination. 7 minutes later, Westlake received a message from Vantage Bridge Public Relations warning that a disgruntled former contractor was attempting to disrupt an urgently needed hospital delivery. At 11:41, Elena's agency director called. "Withdraw the declaration," he said without greeting. "Vantage Bridge says you accessed proprietary files after your contract ended. The Hospital Alliance retained me through counsel to review documents it owns under the executed agreement. That distinction will not save us if they sue. Have they identified a mistranslated sentence? This is bigger than one sentence. It is 43 pages of sentences. Ask them which one I translated inaccurately." He exhaled. "If you do not withdraw by midnight, the agency will terminate your roster status permanently." Elena looked at the comparison table on her screen. 12 years of assignments, references, and specialized credentials sat on the other side of his threat. She had imagined professional ruin as something loud. It arrived instead as a tired man asking her to make his risk smaller. "I will correct any error they can identify," she said. "I will not withdraw an accurate statement because they dislike its effect." The call ended. She did not contact the press. She did not answer the strangers reposting the video of her dead microphone. She did not publish the comparison table. She sent one written response to Vantage Bridge Council, copied to the authorized recipients. "Please identify each translation alleged to be inaccurate and provide the proposed correction." No correction came. At 12:17 a.m., Aisha's engineering team began its second test cycle. The first abnormal unit completed startup and displayed a green ready indicator. When the engineers partially obstructed the line under the manufacturer's approved protocol, the pump failed to produce the required occlusion alarm within the permitted interval. The second unit failed insulation resistance testing. An engineer removed its control board inside the documented inspection area and found pale crystalline deposits near 2 connectors. Under magnification, both deposits showed the angular pattern consistent with dried salt. A swab analysis detected chloride. A third control board from a pump that had not yet failed also showed chloride residue. Aisha checked all 3 serial numbers against Elena's table. Each belonged to the range on K17. The hospital lawyer asked whether the chloride proved seawater exposure. "Not by itself," Aisha said. "We need laboratory confirmation and a larger sample. Chloride can enter through other contamination routes." Elena watched her refuse the tempting conclusion and understood why Aisha had trusted her. They were doing the same work in different disciplines, preserving the boundary between what the evidence supported and what urgency made people want it to support. The team photographed every board before removal, sealed the swabs, logged the instrument's calibration status, and repeated the alarm test with a second analyzer. The failure reproduced. Nobody celebrated being right. At 12:46, she filed a formal recommendation to remove the 24 pumps from service and place the full warehouse batch under safety hold pending expanded testing. The two forms of evidence now met without becoming the same thing. Elena's work showed that the supplier had disclosed an immersion event that disappeared from the English record. The engineering tests showed that devices from the disclosed serial range had real electrical, alarm, and contamination abnormalities. Neither proved that all 4,800 pumps would fail. Together, they made Shipment without review indefensible. At 1:20 a.m., the Hospital Alliance invoked the emergency provision of the purchase agreement and forced a video conference. 4 hours and 10 minutes remained before loading. Faces filled 2 screens in Westlake's incident room: hospital executives, counsel, Vantage Bridge quality staff, COGene representatives, and 3 members of the Independent Audit Committee. Marcus joined from a dark office in downtown Los Angeles. His tie was gone, but his voice retained the smooth patience he used when he wanted resistance to sound irrational. "We are reacting to a translator's preferred definition," he said. "Chimsa can be used broadly in some contexts to describe water impact. 2 failed units do not establish a batch defect. And if we stop this delivery, 18 hospitals will miss the replacement window for recalled equipment. That creates an immediate patient risk, not a theoretical one." No one answered the last point quickly. It was true. The old pumps had been recalled, and some hospitals had only days of reserve capacity. An administrator from a rural hospital said his oncology service had 31 compatible pumps for 46 scheduled infusions. Another warned that a hold might force transfers through roads already threatened by an incoming storm. Marcus did not have to invent the cost of delay. He only had to use it as permission to make uncertainty disappear. Aisha proposed an alternative: keep the warehouse batch intact for 48 hours, redistribute verified reserve pumps across the alliance, and request emergency loan units from 2 manufacturers outside the contract. It would be expensive and operationally brutal, but it would prevent the equipment shortage from becoming an excuse to skip the safety decision. Marcus dismissed the plan as engineering improvisation. Elena waited until the meeting chair recognized her. "I agree that 2 units do not establish the failure rate of the batch," she said. "I have not claimed otherwise." Marcus leaned back. "Then we can stop pretending vocabulary is a safety finding. Vocabulary is not the safety finding. It is the disclosure record." She shared 3 source excerpts. The first was the marine insurer's report, which used Chimsa beside the measured waterline and the duration of saline immersion. The second was a repair order directing technicians to open units from the Chimsa batch and dry internal connector areas. The third was Seagen's own quality record linking Chimsu to the same serial number range. 3 documents, prepared for 3 different purposes, use the same term, Elena said. All 3 describe seawater passing beyond packaging. None uses it to mean atmospheric humidity. Marcus's mouth tightened. "You're still only a translator." "Exactly." She did not raise her voice. "Because I am only the translator, I have not decided the risk for anyone. I have only stopped you from replacing what they said with something easier to sign." For the first time since the meeting began, Hygiene looked directly into her camera. Marisol Vega, Vantage Bridge's Vice President of Quality and Compliance, unmuted herself. "If the original report is authentic, and if K-17 belonged to the executed attachment, our quality system requires a red quarantine on the entire identified lot until the variance is resolved." Marcus turned toward her square on his screen. "The page is an unconfirmed working draft. It was never part of the final disclosure. The signature certificate records 43 pages, the hospital lawyer said. It records a file length, not the contents of each page. Scans are assembled incorrectly all the time. You cannot freeze $60 million of critical equipment because Ms. Park found a page in a Korean folder and wants it to be important. Marisol did not move. I need source authentication and proof that K-17 was part of the final report. The meeting recessed at 2:03 while the hospital legal department contacted the marine investigation company named on the report. In Busan, it was already the working day. At 3:12, an investigator answered from the firm's main office. By 3:48, after counsel verified his identity and authority, he joined a recorded call with the Alliance, Seojin, and Vantage Bridge compliance staff. He confirmed the report number. He confirmed that K-17 belonged to the final report. His firm had never prepared or approved the softened English summary. In that report, he said, Chimsu specifically described seawater crossing the packaging barrier and entering the equipment housing area. It did not mean elevated humidity. Marisol drafted the red quarantine order. Marcus refused to approve its release. At 5:21, the warehouse camera showed the first tractor-trailer reversing toward loading Bay 6. Its white roof moved slowly beneath the sodium lights, while dock workers in reflective jackets waited beside the sealed pallets. Issue the hold, Aisha said. You still cannot prove K-17 was included in the final contract presented to Vantage Bridge, Marcus replied. An investigator can authenticate his report. He cannot testify to what our chief executive signed. The warehouse dispatch system was scheduled to lock routing instructions at 5:28. After that point, canceling the release would require 18 separate carrier interventions while the pallets were already being scanned to vehicles. 7 minutes. Elena reopened the electronic signature certificate. She had studied its page counts and file hashes. This time she ignored both and examined the attachment directory itself. Every formal exhibit had an alphanumeric reference matching the code printed at the top of its source pages: P for pricing, S for service, Q for quality. The incident report was indexed separately. K-01 through K-43. Elena scrolled back to the missing page. Above the marine investigation number, in small type she had treated as an internal page label, was K-17. She opened the chief executive's signing receipt. Marcus had countersigned as the company's transaction officer and certified the attachment directory by reference. K-17 was there. He had not merely received a 43-page file. He had signed an index confirming that the missing page existed inside the final disclosure package. At 5:24, Elena raised her hand. 4 minutes remained. At 5:24, Elena did not tell the room that Marcus had lied. She shared one page. In the upper left corner, she placed the attachment directory countersigned by Marcus. The quality exhibit ran from K-01 through K-43. Beside it, she placed the missing source page, its code printed above the marine investigation number, K-17. Below them sat the investigator's recorded authentication and Elena's signed translation of the sentence containing Chimsu. The final panel showed the electronic signature certificate. The certificate records 43 pages, Elena said. The hospital received an English file containing 42. The missing page is K-17. K-17 appears in the attachment directory Mr. Vale certified when the contract was executed. The marine investigator has confirmed that it belongs to the final report, and in that report Chimsu means seawater crossed the packaging barrier and entered the housing area. Marcus answered at once. That proves an indexing inconsistency. It does not prove. It proves the safety disclosure was part of the signed package, the hospital lawyer said. Elena kept the 4 panels on the screen. She had spent the night refusing conclusions the evidence could not carry. Now she did not need a larger one. This is no longer a disagreement between 2 translators about one word, she said. The original attachment disclosed seawater submersion. The approved English file removed the page and replaced the incident with humidity exposure. On the warehouse feed, a worker lifted a scanner toward the first pallet. 5:25. Marisol Vega opened the quality control system. I am initiating red quarantine for the full identified lot. Marcus turned toward his camera. You do not have commercial release authority. I do not need it for a quality hold. The chief executive has already approved shipment. The chair of the board's audit committee had remained silent through most of the night. Now she leaned toward her screen. Section 8.4 of the Quality Charter gives the Vice President of Quality and Compliance independent emergency authority when a material safety disclosure may have been omitted, she said. That authority bypasses commercial leadership and the chief executive. The audit committee confirms its use. Marcus stared at her. You are freezing $60 million of equipment on a translator's opinion. Marisol selected the serial range. No. I am freezing it on an authenticated disclosure, a signed attachment index, and documented failures from the same lot. 526. The system asked for a second authorization. Aisha uploaded the hospital's formal isolation recommendation. The audit chair entered her credential. Marisol read the range aloud while Elena compared it against K17, digit by digit. One number near the end differed by a transposed pair. Stop, Elena said. The room froze. She checked the Korean repair order, then the warehouse manifest. The entry on the English manifest is reversed. Source serial ends 7419. The manifest says 7149. Marisol corrected it. If Elena had stayed silent for the sake of speed, 36 pumps would have remained outside the hold. At 5:27, she pressed release quarantine order. The warehouse screen changed from green to red. Across 6 loading bays, scanners rejected the pallets already staged for movement. Dock doors stopped rising. The tractor-trailer at Bay 6 remained backed against an empty platform while supervisors received the same instruction: do not load. Safety hold. All 4,800 units locked. The routing system had not yet sealed the release. Not one affected pump had left the warehouse. For several seconds, nobody in the meeting spoke. Elena looked at the word Chimsu on the authenticated page. Marcus had cut her microphone, ended her contract, and called her accuracy a misunderstanding. None of that had changed what the word meant. At 5:27, its meaning had stopped the shipment. The hold solved only the first danger. By 5:40, Aisha had divided the response into 3 teams. Westlake's engineers expanded testing of the advanced units. The Alliance's logistics staff identified verified pumps that could be redistributed without stripping any hospital below emergency reserve. Seojin's quality office, now working directly with Marisol, supplied the original Korean serial records. Elena stayed. Her declaration was complete, and no one could have faulted her for closing the laptop. But the serial records passed through 3 naming systems: Korean manufacturing codes, Vantage Bridge import labels, and hospital inventory numbers. A single mistranscribed suffix could place an immersed unit in the safe pool or hold a verified unit that a neonatal ward needed. She and Hygiene read the source list aloud over the recorded line. Aisha's team checked each number against photographs of the physical labels. 2 pumps in the advanced shipment had been logged under abbreviated import codes, both traced back to K17 and remained isolated. For verified reserve pumps had been mistakenly associated with the affected pallet because of a shared docking station number. Elena separated the device serials from the accessory codes before the error could delay their use. Marcus attempted to rejoin the command channel at 6:03. The hospital lawyer removed him pending review of his financial and decision-making conflicts. Marisol ordered that no commercial officer approve, summarize, or alter quality communications during the response. By 6:26, the Alliance had secured emergency loans from 2 manufacturers and redistributed tested reserve units among the hospitals with the lowest capacity. Westlake postponed the neonatal intensive care unit's replacement schedule rather than introduce the new pumps. No infant lost necessary treatment. No infusion was canceled. No affected device entered clinical service. Elena watched the first verified loan shipment leave a different warehouse after 3 people independently checked its records. Relief did not arrive as triumph. It arrived as a clean list, an empty loading bay, and the knowledge that no family would ever have to learn why a pump displaying 10 had delivered 40. At 9:10 that morning, Vantage Bridge published a statement describing the hold as a routine documentation dispute involving an outsourced translation provider. The statement did not mention K17, the seawater duration, the missing page, the corrosion, or the flow anomaly. It might have worked if Marcus had not humiliated Elena in public the previous day. The video of her dead microphone had been viewed millions of times. 18 hospital systems refused VantageBridge's private briefing and demanded a public safety conference with the source documents visible. The Alliance scheduled it for that afternoon in the same summit ballroom. VantageBridge offered Elena a prepared statement. It praised collaborative caution, avoided assigning responsibility, and required her to call Chimsu, a term subject to contextual interpretation. She returned it and signed. When Elena stepped onto the stage, the signing table was gone. The silver pens had been removed, but the microphone stood in the same place. She tested it once. The green light remained on. Marcus sat at the opposite end of the platform with counsel. He had been removed from the emergency command chain, not yet suspended from the company, and he used the distinction as if it proved vindication. Ms. Park is a language contractor, he told the reporters. She is not an electrical engineer, a biomedical engineer, or a regulatory specialist. She exceeded her competence and created panic from limited test results that cannot represent an entire shipment. Elena waited until he finished. He is correct about one thing, she said. I am not an engineer. The engineers established the device failures. I established something different. After the supplier clearly warned you that the equipment had been submerged, you changed the word, removed the page that defined the incident, and told the hospitals the risk had never been disclosed. The screen behind her showed Hygiene's answer from the signing ceremony. The Korean audio played first. Chimsu was clear even to people who did not understand the rest of the sentence. Then the recording showed Elena interpreting submerged in seawater. Marcus interrupted with maritime humidity. Her microphone light went dark. The next slide placed the source report beside the approved English summary. 11 hours and 43 minutes of saltwater immersion disappeared into elevated humidity. Water above the housing seam became damp packaging. A repeat startup and button check became recertification. The next slide showed the missing K-17 page and the signed attachment directory. The last showed Westlake's laboratory images, green corrosion, chloride deposits, the failed insulation result, and the graph of abnormal flow. Questions came first from the hospitals that had been told delay would harm their patients. A neonatal director asked why the source report had not been available to clinical engineering before signing. A rural hospital administrator asked who had decided that a sales summary could replace a controlled quality attachment. The leader of the alliance asked why VantageBridge had accused Elena within minutes, while taking nearly 20 hours to acknowledge the engineering failures. Marcus answered each question with a different version of urgency. The shortage had required speed. Commercial teams routinely condensed technical files. Public confidence had to be protected while facts were reviewed. Urgency explains why the hospitals needed the pumps, Aisha said from the front row. It does not explain why you denied them the information required to decide whether those pumps could be used. For the first time, the shortage no longer belonged to Marcus as a shield. The people who had lived with it were refusing to let him speak on their behalf. Marcus leaned toward his microphone. Those materials were assembled after Ms. Park's termination. The translation chain remains disputed. Hygiene appeared live on the screen from Seojin's quality office in Busan. An independent interpreter sat beside her, and both channels were recorded. I used Chimsu because the devices were immersed, Hygiene said. Ms. Park translated my disclosure accurately. When she said submerged, I believed the American parties had been informed. I did not approve the English summary shown on stage, and I did not know K-17 had been removed from the copy sent to the hospitals. Marcus looked toward Seojin's commercial manager, but Minsu was not on the stage and could not replace her answer. You are asking this audience to accept that a commercial summary was malicious because it was shorter than a technical report, Marcus said. No, Elena replied. I am asking them to look at what was shortened. 43 pages became 42. Submerged became humidity. A limited function check became regulatory recertification. Every change made the same transaction easier to sign. The chair of the Independent Audit Committee rose from the front row before Marcus could answer. She announced the preliminary actions into the room's live microphones. Marcus Vail was suspended pending an external investigation. The vice president of procurement was stripped of transaction authority. The $60 million agreement was suspended for material failure of disclosure. All emails, recordings, file versions, approvals, and system logs were under legal preservation. Vantage Bridge formally withdrew its allegation that Elena had committed gross mistranslation. The last statement produced the loudest reaction, but Elena did not mistake it for repair. Company counsel approached her after the conference and offered a private apology from senior leadership. "This was not a private misunderstanding," Elena said. "You accused me publicly, suspended my work through my agency, and published the accusation through corporate channels. The correction must use every channel that carried the claim. It must state plainly that my translation was accurate." Counsel asked whether the company could say that reasonable professionals differed. No, they did not differ. One professional translated the source. Commercial leadership replaced it. The correction went live that evening under Vantage Bridge's name, on its press page, investor feed, and the accounts that had distributed the original statement. Elena's agency restored her roster status. She did not thank the agency for returning what it had taken without first asking whether the accusation was true. 6 weeks later, the State Medical Procurement Commission opened a public hearing on the contract. The external investigation had reconstructed the decision trail. 3 days before the signing, Vantage Bridge Quality had warned Marcus that classification as seawater submersion could require a mandatory lot quarantine. He had not forged the Korean technical report. He had done something easier to disguise. He authorized the commercial team to substitute a softened English summary and permitted the source page defining the event to disappear from the hospital copy. The hearing did not stop at his decisions. Commissioners examined why procurement could distribute an English summary without source page reconciliation, why quality had no automatic notice when an attachment disappeared, and why an outside interpreter's warning could be overruled by the executive whose compensation depended on closing the transaction. The board had possessed policies against all 3 failures. None had given the people closest to the evidence power to stop the process. When Elena requested a pause, Marcus already knew the word might trigger the hold. He chose to execute the agreement first and address the classification later, believing that hospitals facing shortages would accept the pumps once delivery became an accomplished fact. The commission also found that procurement leadership had treated the English summary as a sales instrument rather than a controlled safety document. Seagen's commercial division faced a regulatory inquiry over its role in the altered summary. All submerged units remained isolated for expanded evaluation and disposition. Vantage Bridge's board dismissed Marcus for severe violations of quality governance and disclosure duties. It did not call the decision a misunderstanding. Elena was not appointed chief executive. No surprise inheritance or enormous settlement arrived to turn accuracy into a fairy tale about wealth. The Hospital Alliance offered her something narrower and more consequential: authority to build an Office of Language Safety and Technical Document Integrity. She accepted only after the Alliance agreed to 3 conditions. First, an interpreter who identified a material conflict in safety terminology could pause a procurement or clinical document process without seeking permission from sales. Second, no commercial department could remove, rewrite, or replace a source language document without documented review by quality and the originating author. Third, language professionals working on patient safety matters would report directly to the Alliance's Patient Safety Committee, with protected access to the Audit Committee when management overrode a warning. The office would maintain bilingual version histories, require independent review for high-risk terms, and train engineers and lawyers to treat translators as part of the evidence chain rather than as decorative voices at the end of it. Elena did not ask for the power to decide whether pumps were safe. She asked for the power to keep other people from erasing the words engineers and quality officers used to describe the risk. Several months later, she sat at another procurement meeting beneath another wall of documents. The contract was smaller. The room was quieter. Near the end of a supplier presentation, a young interpreter named Sophia hesitated over a manufacturing declaration. The English slide called the components new. The source speaker had called them reprocessed. Sophia translated the sentence accurately, then glanced toward the commercial representatives. "The words are not equivalent," she said. "I think we need to clarify before continuing." Silence moved through the room. For an instant, Elena saw the ballroom again, the dead green light, the security officer waiting for her badge, the thin laughter of people relieved that someone else had been made small. Everyone at the table looked toward her. Elena did not answer for Sophia. She did not soften the term, explain away the pause, or use her new title to become another person whose voice mattered more than the one closest to the source. She reached across the table and pushed the microphone back toward the young interpreter. "Keep the original word on the screen," Elena said. "Let her finish." The source term remained beside the English translation while Sophia explained the difference. The meeting paused. Quality opened the manufacturing record. Nobody laughed. Nobody reached for the microphone switch. This time, no one turned it off.